Good morning. George put me first to speak on the very first day of the summit, so absolutely no pressure. Oh my gosh. Right, let's just get into it. So, the Barabar Enigma. Some of you might know about the Barabar Caves already, so sorry if I'm repeating a little bit of information, but I just felt really passionate that everybody on the planet needs to know about these caves. Because they've been known about for a while, but whereas everybody knows a lot about ancient Egypt or ancient Turkey, not a lot of people know about the stuff that's going on in ancient India. And personally, I think that it's even cooler than some of the stuff that we see in Egypt. Oh, I have a thing. Here we go. Right. So first, I want to say a big thank you to Jahannah Films. These are the guys, they're a French production company, and they make fantastic documentaries called Builders of the Ancient Mysteries, Back to Bam, the Barabar Caves, and I had the actual pleasure of narrating their documentary for the English version. They'd made a fantastic version in French, and then they put out an English version a few years ago, which I watched, and it was an amazing movie, but I couldn't understand the English narrator. So I reached out to the director, Patrice, and I was like, I love your film, I think it's so great. Dude, I can't understand what this narrator is saying. And he was like, yeah, we're aware. She said that, it was a French lady who said that she could speak English, but she couldn't. And I was like, hey, I'm an actor. I would love to donate my voice, and if you need an English narrator, proper English narrator. And he was like, yes, please. So they flew me to Paris. I had 2 days to record the documentary. We finished at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I had a flight back to London at 8 a.m. And it was an amazing experience. And I want to thank Jahannah Films for giving me all the information and all of the imagery and the footage to show you guys today. I got asked to come back to voice the third film, which is all about specifically about Barabar. So the team went out last year, and they conducted a whole host of experiments, sound experiments particularly, and 3D scanning, like real in-depth, precise 3D scans of all of these caves, and the data that came out from the most recent trip is astonishing, and that's what I'm trying to communicate to you guys today. So there are 7 caves in a remote part of India, and the inscriptions date the caves to at least 260 BC. However, there is some real funny things going on with the timeline, which I'm going to explain to you guys, where I think personally these caves are way older, because there is nothing like them previously in India, around this time period of India, or anything since. They kind of just appeared, and there they are. Each cave shows mathematical knowledge and stone carving skills that are not attributed to that time in history, and I'm going to walk you through all the anomalies. So where are they? They are in Barabar, which is in sort of northeastern India, near Nepal and Bangladesh. And the caves are cut out of natural granite in this thing called a whale's back, because it looks like a whale. And so there's 2 sites to the cave, so 7 caves, 5 are complete finished, which is really interesting because they can show us little clues on perhaps how they were made and polished. And they're spread out over 2 sites, so you've got the Nagarjuna caves and you've got the Barabar caves. And they're about a couple kilometers apart. And now to give you some context of what we're looking at before I show you the Barabar caves, I'm going to show you what the architecture was like around the same time. So we're talking around 200 BC, over 2,000 years ago. This is Ajanta, this beautiful temple, which you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's ancient India. Beautiful, ornate, artistic, got it. And there's another site dating to a couple hundred years later, Ellora, which is cut out of the bedrock. It goes on for like 2.5 kilometers, and it's all done in one go. And it's, again, beautifully ornate. From the floor to the ceiling, it's covered in inscriptions and beautiful figures and statues. However, when you start to analyze it on a more precise mathematical lens, it's all unpolished. The pillars are not aligned. They're all slightly different sizes. They start at different levels. The floor is not flat and the surfaces are uneven. So as amazing and spectacular as this site is, it doesn't even compare to when we're talking about the precision and the craftsmanship that appears over in Barabar. So this, when I first showed people this, they're like, well, are you showing me a picture of a machine? Like, what is this? This is a bird's eye view of the 3D scan rendering of 5 of the finished caves. And it does look like some sort of part of a spaceship, but this is in fact the shapes that we are looking at inside those big whale backs. And yeah, entirely carved of granite, all in one go. So it's starting to look like something out of 2001, Space Odyssey in there. And they've all got different names. I'm going to run you through each of the caves because each cave is a completely unique shape. And at first, you think that they don't really correlate to each other or have anything to do with the other one. But the data that's coming out from when you analyze the stands and the sound machines, they are actually all connected in a certain way. They share geometric formulas. There's like hidden data. Sound frequency plays a massive role in all of them. And they are actually connected and aligned to each other. So Gopika is one of the biggest and like most famous ones. The chamber is entirely composed of curves, and which is really, really spectacular because in Egypt we get a lot of polished granite, like the boxes in the Serapeum, if you're aware of them, which are amazing, but there's no curves involved in that. So that's a feat in itself, polishing granite vertically. But to add curvature in there and precise curvature is a whole other deal for stonemasonry. And another thing that's amazing is the polish. Now, the guys told me when they went out to India the first time, they had real trouble actually filming the cave surfaces on cameras because to the human eye, they could see it was like a kind of almost translucent glass polish finish. But when they got out a camera or they tried to film it, the translucent polish wasn't be able to be seen on the camera, and they kept looking through to sort of the rough bedrock behind, and it just didn't look right. So this time they went back and they bought a whole load of shiny LED lights to really try and picture what the human eye can see inside this place on the camera, and they were a bit more successful. Now, again, something that you couldn't see from the human eye, but when you scan them, you can. They are symmetrical if you slice them, lengthways and through the middle. And even some, they said that some, so it's replicated to a level that's super high. So it's about 70% perfectly symmetrical, but they also said, because of this mirror polish, because of the mirror polish inside the cave, it was actually throwing off the 3D scanner, and they had to, this was a very conservative level of data because it was knocking the 3D scanning points was basically getting refracted, and so they had to knock it down. So it's probably a bit more symmetrical than 70%, but they were giving very conservative numbers. And another thing that's super interesting is that the walls are not directly straight. They are all inclined just a little bit and exactly matching, mirror image from one side to the other, 87 degrees on the wonk. And also, at first you think, okay, well, why is the entrance like not in the middle if it's all about symmetry? But when you look into the maths of the shape of the volumes of the space, nothing is done by accident. Everything is designed precisely. So here, the entrance actually lines up to a circle from one end. So they were putting it not in the middle for a reason. And again, they took the data from the scans and they went back to some experts in France, had them analyzed, and they found some really interesting things, that the sphere of the ceiling, the vaulted ceiling, was actually composed of two absolute perfect spheres that you wouldn't even see 2/3 of it because the plan goes sort of into the bedrock. And so they were able, whoever designed these caves knew how to design spaces that would be created both above the ground and then the perfect sphere would continue under. And the volume of shape, again, is absolutely identical from one end to the other. So it looks to my eyes, it looks like somebody has 3D CAD scanned into granite these volumetric shapes. But why? So, oh yeah, and also Kapika, that big cave we were looking at, the first cave, they realized that it fit exactly in the middle of a 120-meter radius. So again, the guys who are mapping this out, why they picked this particular cave, they did it and they aligned it to radiuses that go out crazy far. And this is in a remote part of India with it's up in the mountains with sort of rocky terrain. So mapping out precisely where you want this thing to be aligned to. And the more we look into all of the sites, the alignments get more and more intricate. They were able to do it literally over 120 meters of rocky terrain with nothing but, we can assume, their eyes and hands and some tools. I can see why people think it was aliens, because it does look like they were able to just sort of come down. Now, Sudama is, again, okay, it's one thing to make one room. Sudama has 2 chambers. So you go in, and you go into this first sort of squarish looking room, and then you go through a second passage into a perfect dome, which looks like a mushroom. And this is, again, super complicated because the dome that's coming down, it actually has a lip underneath that is curved in itself. Again, all of this is polished, every single area of it. So we know from tests that you can polish surfaces on the flat pretty easily, even like using sort of older techniques and primitive tools. If you get a bit of granite and you get enough of some abrasive and some sludge, and if you go back and forth for about 45 minutes to an hour, you can start to get a really, really flat, smooth surface. But the minute that you start to go up, and let alone like curves, like that gets really difficult. You're playing with gravity and all these forces. To get that exactly smooth and aligned on curves is, well, we don't know. We don't know how they did it. And another thing is, again, it's like, wow, you're going to a lot of effort to make something precise. Again, the human eye probably wouldn't read this, and it's showing up on the scans. The inside of the curved dome is mirrored on the outside. No, there we go. So this dome is the perfect mirror of the inside sphere, which you don't know why you would need to do that, because you can't really tell if you're just running from one side and running to the other. Yeah, so here we go. You can sort of see there. So they've made a perfect replica. Again, why would you do that? Why would you need to do that? Because it would be so much easier just to make a squared off room that goes into another dome. But for some reason, they really wanted to do that, and they really wanted to do this curved lip. Now, all of the caves, of the 7 caves, all 6 of them have these trapezoidal doors, door frames, kind of minimal aesthetic. I quite like it. And it's interesting because that's not typically seen in India. Door frames and doors tend to be squared off, and then they have these beautiful, ornate, carved, kind of like heart-shaped doorways. But where do we find trapezoidal doors? But in Peru and in Egypt, all the way back around the same time in post-2000 years. So it's just interesting, on the other side of India, in a remote mountainside, somebody's making doors that match those of Peru and Egypt. Here again, if you're aware of the Serapeum, the boxes in Saqqara, Sudama has corner points, polished corner points, that if I didn't realize that this was ancient India, I would think that was Saqqara. Again, Sudama has 87.1% plus 0.3 of this curved wall. Again, why it's so much harder to do it on a curve. And also to remind you that whoever's making this, they have one shot of doing this. Because if you mess up, and if Barry makes 82 degrees, like it's over. It's not going to work. So that you have one shot, you have one job, and they nailed it every time in every cave. You've got Vapiaka, which is this cute little one, super shiny. And again, with the 87.1 perfect inverted on the wonk walls. And then this also has inverted walls the other way, so they're making it super inverted. This, again, the longitudinal symmetry is amazing, even if it's conservative. Nearly 70%, 75% when you do it that way. Vadatika. Vadatika is made up of perfect circle and square, but it really annoyed me because the passageway to go in is on the wonk, and I'm like, why would you do that? It's almost like, oh, I've got OCD, I want it all to align perfectly. But again, they did that for a reason. And when they were looking at the scans, they realized that the circle and the square actually it translates to a perfect sphere and cylinder, and the volume is equal, precise. Again, it just looks like a bloody CAT scan had done this, or a 3D printer. And Vadatika is interesting because it's got, it's not just an arc, there's 3 centers to the arc. So whoever was carving this out had to make sure, again, in the one go, that he hits this arc perfectly, and then they curve, and then they hit this arc perfectly, and then the third one. So I think they were just showing off how cool they are at this point. And again, the volume in the spheres are just like amazing. I'm not a super maths person, so I'm just going to go with them like, well, yeah, the volume, yeah. But apparently this is like really, really cool. So the passageway being on the wonk, like, it felt weird to my eyes, but it's really important because, and they only noticed this when they went back and did the more detailed scans, because this is not something that's available to the human eye, because Vapiaka and Vadatika are kind of on opposite sides of one of these whale backs, the big mountain lump. And the entranceway at 85 degrees cuts across precisely through the opposite cave. And then where that intersects, it's north, south, east, west. It is aligned perfectly to north. So that's when they realized, oh, these caves are starting to have relations to each other. They're not just individual shapes. There's something going on between all of them. And again, you wouldn't see that if you were just visiting and running around. So again, how did they do that? How did they line that up? There'd be somebody running over the mountain with rope and chalk, and yeah, it's amazing. Karan Chopper, which has a near perfect floor rectangle. This one I think has been, there's like a kind of bench in there, granite bench, and at some point we think that there's been a bit of recycling, reusing of these caves. They were used historically by the Ajivika, the sort of common people of the area. So I think there's been animals kept in here and all sorts of stuff. So it is amazing that they are still in the condition that they are, and they are still showing up so precise on the scans. But again, Karan Chopper fits the thing of the 89, of the inverted things. And again, the maths that it uses to work out the shape, they're going through the floor, and they're making these shapes that are, half of them are available above the ground and half are underneath. Okay, so this is Lomas Rishi. This is the one cave out of the 7 that has the more typical aesthetic of India. You look at that and you're like, yeah, ancient India, great. And so the team wanted to check the stonemasonry work, the craftsmanship, and they were like, let's analyze Lomas Rishi, and let's analyze all the other caves. And so they asked some independent stonemason experts. They flew them out, and they got them to analyze everything and say, what do you think of this work compared to this work? And they all said, without a doubt, they would put their professional names on the line, and they did in the movie, that the work on the outside of Lomas Rishi, it is not even comparable to whoever it was that made the insides of the caves. It was like visibly bendy and wonky to the eye. The actual thing isn't even aligned properly straight. You could draw a line down the center, and it's actually, you can't even see with your eye. They haven't even lined it up with the actual door frame itself. It's sort of like this. So it's beautiful to look at, but it's just categorically not the same person. So that implies that these, potentially, when we're looking at the historical timeline and trying to unravel that Lomas Rishi was later trying to be like repurposed or recycled. But it was not the original people who turned up and did all the other ones. And now inside Lomas Rishi, this is one of the unfinished ones. And so this, again, this has all the clues. You get your detective glasses out, because we can see how it might have been made, or you can flip the other way and be the argument that it was being recycled. So you've got the raw ceiling and a raw floor. However, the walls are polished, which, again, all the stonemasons were like, you would never do that. You would never, ever, ever. Polishing is the very, very last thing you do. You make sure you get your shape absolutely perfect, and you map it out, plan it out, you execute it, and then you polish. So the idea that they would polish the walls, and just to give you a kind of time frame, historically these things take about 12, 15 years to make. That's a conservative, rushed effort if you're hand polishing and hand carving the whole of these spaces. So you would spend best part of a decade making these walls and then start again on the ceiling. And this is why you wouldn't do that, because whoever was carving the ceiling out accidentally was chipping in to all the beautiful polish work of the walls. So that made the team go, yeah, we think that this was probably being redone, or somebody was attempting to finish, if it was left unfinished at some point, but they were maybe restyling one of the caves, and then they realized, oh, actually, crap, we're messing up, we can't do it, and then therefore it was left. Again, outside Lomas Rishi, you see these sort of chop marks, which you can see in lots of sites in like ancient Egypt, and they're really common. They are like stonemasonry tools, people just making sure their blades are sharp. But you only find them at Lomas Rishi. There's no tool marks or workers' evidence anywhere. So it's like they literally came, made these perfect caves, and then pissed off. And apart from Lomas Rishi, where we can see evidence of people doing, more common work. And I wanted to point this out. So this is in the unfinished dome of Lomas Rishi. You can see there's some sort of circular tool mark. And if you are aware of the work that Ben from Uncharted X is doing, he's looking into the pre-dynastic vases, the granite vases that are, I think these Barabar Caves and the granite vases are of a similar, not that I'm saying the same people made them, but very, very similar craftsmanship and skill set and possibly tools. And this, to me, looked like the inside of these carved granite vases. It looked like a similar, whatever they were doing to make the dome. And I'm wondering if we can crack one or the other, we might be able to help the other site out on how this thing was made. Okay, now this is where my strong suit doesn't come in. I barely passed maths at school. But we find two measurements inside Barabar. There's a Barabar yard, they've decided to call it, because it's a measurement of 85.4.11 centimeters. And if you whack that in a circle and chop it into 6, 1/6 of that is 44.72. If you square that, it makes the meter. So you find meter measurements and Barabar yard measurements. Now, meter measurements is odd. I mean, meter turns up in other places in the world. They're in Pumapuku, the H blocks are like a perfect meter. You find it in the King's Chamber. But people are like, yeah, cool, so what? There's, so Sudama is 11 meters by 6 meters, 2 meters and 1 meter. They find precisely the meter in the caves. But the meter wasn't invented until like the 1760s. That was only when someone was able to accurately travel the world and map the world and create the meter by that means. So this is another point to the argument that perhaps the meter was in use in ancient times, and we rediscovered it in the 1700s. So therefore, did they travel the world? I mean, that would make sense if the doors are looking the same as Peru, but okay, cool, the polish. The amazing, glassy, perfect polish. So yeah, one thing to polish side to side, vertically becomes complex, and curved ceiling is just mental. Granite, you're going through quartz, feldspar, and mica. So you have to have a tool that's gonna like smash through the granite and the quartz, but also not chip away and fly chunks off when you go through soft, hard surfaces. And one thing I learned about from the movie, from a bit of stonemasonry, is that you can have surfaces that are flat or smooth, and they are a little bit different. So you can have a completely, perfectly flat surface, but it's rough. Or you can have a real smooth surface, but it's on the wonk or it's bumpy. And Barabar is both precisely flat and precisely smooth. Okay, and this is how they measured it. They got a roughness surface tester, and 1 micron is 0.011 millimeter, or 1,000 microns equals 1 millimeter. And if you just look at like your fingernail, you can start to see how tiny we're talking here. So to put it in a little bit of perspective, we've got modern day marble, which registered at 2.253, and modern day glass, which is 0.101, and Barabar is coming up closer to modern day glass than it is to modern day marble. And this is how modern day, we industrially polish stuff. Again, look at the size of that machine, and it's on the horizontal. So we've got industrial polished granite is at 9.4, marble 2.2-ish, glass again around the 0.1, and the best, most smoothest surface they found in one of the caves, it was at 0.4. So yeah, we're talking comparatively, it's glass finish. And this is the better, when they put the little super shiny LEDs. It looks like a spaceship. So cool. Okay, yeah, and this is today's modern tolerances for like the flatness level tolerance of a modern thing. For a 2 meter rule, it must not show a difference in alignment greater than 2 millimeters, i.e. 1 on 1,000 on a plane, on a flat. And in Barabar, we have 1 in 100,000. And that's not on a flat, that's in a 3-dimensional. So basically, it smashes modern tolerance levels out of the park. It completely passes. It's the best. The problem with the historical timeline. So I'm going to whiz you through quick 101 of local Indian historical history. So there was a king called Ashoka, who I imagine could have looked like Mr. Castle. And he reigned from 273 BC to around 232. So he had quite a short reign. So considering he is like in history, he's the guy that's linked with these caves. He didn't reign for that long, and again, they take forever to make. So there are inscriptions in the cave. So they are completely void of inscriptions, apart from some of the caves have some inscriptions, some have none, and some have multiple. So, but the first cave that we look at in history is called, they have different cave names today as they did in the past. This called Nagroda was given to the Ajavikas by King Priyasardhan, who is also Ashoka, he has 2 names, when he was anointed for his 12th year of reign. So it basically, he gave them to, and the Ajavikas, they weren't like other royals or anything, they were literally like the common folk, the peasants. He was gifting them the cave when he got to 12 years as king. So therefore, they assume that's why they get it takes 12 years to make a cave. Well, also the stonemasons say that that's a lot of rubbish, it would take way more, but historically they're like about 12 years. And that's assuming that the first thing he did when he became king was like, right, I've got to build a cave to give to my people. And it means, so the Siddharma would have been commissioned immediately and finished in under 12 years, purely for the reason of just looking flash. Okay, but then this is where it gets all confusing. So this Rizopri, the cave, was also gifted in the 12th year, and even though it's unfinished, so why finish one? And that's Sudama, the like really, really cool one. And then you would also give one that's unfinished, like you don't give gifts that are not finished. And then there are later caves that were finished, and they have no inscription, so technically they weren't donated. So why would you finish one and not gift it, and then gift one that's not ready? The other one, 7 years later, King Priyasardhan, Ashoka, Randall, came to Jafla when he was anointed for his 19th reign. And on this occasion, he gave the cave to the Ajavikas. Again, they're not saying why he gave them at this point. They're just saying, woohoo, he did. Oh, and should notice as well that the inscription carvings themselves is very similar to what we see in Egypt. Like, they're not great. They're kind of you know, I look at them and I'm like, I could probably do that. Just give me a tool and I'll do it. They're not matching. And again, why would you not polish? If you can polish, if they've shown that they can polish all these crazy curves and whatnot, why would you not do the whole job and make everything nice and polished and precise? It's not precise work. Dasarata was either the son or the grandson who came after Ashoka, and so he is in history, he gifted 3 of the caves. So either he continued making them and gifting them, or he gifted caves that Ashoka had also made. So this cave was handed over to the respectable Ajavakas as a residence for the rainy season, as long as the moon and sun will last, which is a very long contract for living somewhere, and by Dasarata, beloved of the gods, as soon as he was installed, which again means he didn't have time to make it, because just straight away the first thing he did, right, I'm going to give you a cave. Why? So then we start to have an idea of why, and I joke you not, this is historically why these caves were made. All that perfect precision, all that time, all that effort, all the incline, all of the like precise stuff aligned to each other. Oh, it's because the common folk needed somewhere to go in the rainy season to put the goats and to put themselves. So in history, we have inside in the caves, we've got these little inscriptions. It's mentioned one other place. There are these pillars, these Ashoka pillars, which are these beautiful, like polished pillars that apparently just turned up. Like nobody really knows how or what they did, but there's a whole bunch of them turned up, and they were all originally smooth because some of them are still left smooth today and some of them have inscriptions on. A bit like we have obelisks today in Egypt, where some of them are left completely smooth and some of them have inscriptions on. So there is an idea that maybe they arrived all plain and minimalist, and then later people decided to decorate them and write stuff on. And in the pillars, it mentions about Ashoka gifting the caves, but the pillars themselves seem to, again, pop up, and then they don't do polished pillars. Like that's not a typical Indian pillar. So I don't know if the people making the pillars made the caves, but they seem to pop up and sort of disappear again into history. Now, the inscriptions on the Lomas Rishi one inside, they date to 700 years after Ashoka. So this kind of backs up, if we're going to go by looking into maybe this was added later on Lomas Rishi, potentially, and I think that's probably the case, that somebody was trying to repurpose the caves or make them look a bit more snazzy, and then they tried to inscribe it. But yeah, it was this was like nearly 1,000 years after even Ashoka, and I have a feeling the caves are way predate Ashoka. So there are other caves that are similar of style. This one's made of schist, but it didn't get the specs. Schist is different to granite. It's very hard to work with, and they didn't last. They kind of broke and shattered. It's a very shattery rock. And the inscriptions in the schist ones, they date to post-Ashoka. They're, however, really weird. So the archaeologists, from India, the Indiologists, they will not consider or move the inscriptions. They say, no, the inscriptions of Barabar fundamentally date them to 260 BC because it says Ashoka's name, so obviously he made them. But it actually doesn't say he made them. It says that he gifted them. He gave, he gifted. It doesn't say he created, he designed, he constructed. It just said that he kind of passed them on, or that just Dasarata inherited. But the archaeologists are willing to wiggle the dates of these ones because it helps fill in the hole of where are the prototypes. Where's the linear line? If you look at the iPhone 1 to the iPhone 15 looks very different, and we have a strong line of going, okay, that's development, or the development of the aeroplane. It's very clear what was the first one. They don't have prototypes, so the archaeologists are like, well, maybe the inscriptions on this one are, maybe we got that wrong, and so maybe these are the first ones. And then they tried it in schist, and then they moved to granite, and I was like, I have a feeling that they definitely tried to copy the granite ones in schist, and it didn't really work. But interesting that they were willing to move one side to fit the other narrative and not the other way around. Now, the sound, 34.4 hertz. So the guys went back. A quick little story. I was kind of involved in the pre-production of the documentary before I got to narrate it. They did invite me out to India. But I kind of chickened out to go in because they told me the crazy stories of how it's so remote where Barabar is. There's no hotels, there was no restaurants. They had to sleep literally like in the back of some locals' animal barns. And there were so many mosquitoes at night that they slept with hoodies on and pulled them in, but in the morning their nose would have hundreds of mosquito bites. And they were like, yeah, do you want to come? I was like, do you know what? I'm fine. I'll wait for some Airbnbs to pop up and then I'll pop along. But yes, so I was a bit involved in the pre-production, and they said, right, so we've approached one of the best in France, one of the best sort of sound engineer tech companies. We want to get their equipment because we want to do this properly. The guys are really into doing it properly in the science and getting everything over the line with the mainstream if they can. And so they found this place in France, and they got quoted, I think it was about 15,000 euros for them to get the machines that they needed to do this. And then when the company found out that it was JN Films who make Builders of the Ancient Mysteries and sort of more alternative, unconventional history things, they retracted the offer and said, no, we don't want anything to do with this. And we were like, wait, what? Like, why would you not want to? Because surely you're going to be proving or disproving. But they were like, no, we don't want anything to do with alternate histories. So the guys had to crowdfund, and they did find the equipment, but they couldn't get it off the big guys. So they did loads of sound experiments in the caves, because on the one hand, it's the aesthetic and the polish that's amazing and incredible, and the maths and the volume. On the other hand, it's the sound of these caves, because they are almost unlike anything in the world. So they did over 100 balloon explosions with sound level meters. They found that 74.9, around 75 hertz, being in the center of the dome, the sound becomes highly amplified. And they found this because they accidentally blew up not one, but two Bose speakers. So it was also the most expensive experiment that they've ever done. They were playing they tried all different kinds of music. They did rock music, opera. They got shamans in there, and they experimented on everything. But the speakers literally blew up when it got to 75 hertz, and that happened twice. The caves make speech unintelligible. So if you're more than 50 centimeters away from someone, you can't hear what they're saying. They're not made for listening, for preaching, for speaking. It would be the worst place to live if you are gifting them to people. It's like a joke. Go and live in this lovely cave. Joke's on you, you can't speak to anyone. They combine both reverberation and resonance. And so yes, certain frequencies are amplified, and it's the polish and the symmetry and the shape. They all come together to create this sound phenomenon. So there's a reason why all of the walls are inclined. There's a reason why the ceilings are vaulted with the specific arcs. There's a reason why the polish helps direct the sound. Like this. They also discovered that there are particular points in the room. Oh no, I'll go back to that. But okay, just for a little bit of reference, Notre Dame has a reverb rate of 10 to 12 seconds. Like, Sodama has 62, and Vatican has 72 seconds. That's, sorry, Notre Dame, not as cool. They also discovered that there is a specific point where it does all sort of filter together to get the most effect, and it is about 80 centimeters off the floor in the center of the curved ceilings, which is around head height. If you're the average size human and you're sitting down on the floor, it's going right in to your ears and your head. So that's when they started to think, okay, maybe there's something to do with there's a functional point to these caves, and if all of it's not aesthetic that they're going for, it is function. Everything's got something to do with something. I had an idea. I was like, wait, guys, have you tried 5 people sitting down in 5 caves and playing a particular sound frequency, and then you can all talk to each other or something? They were like, no, we didn't try that. I was like, well, I should have gone. But I'm thinking, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, so if they're all connected, maybe it's like an ancient telephone system or an ancient Wi-Fi system, and you can all get to a certain frequency and just see the universe. But yeah. So far, again, they're trying to do everything absolutely by the book, and so they don't want to make claims what they don't know, but they say that 3 to 4 of the chambers they can confirm resonate, they are tuned, even though they are different shapes and volumes, they are tuned to resonate at 34.4 hertz. That seems to be the magic number, which again, it's like, yeah, the designers knew. They knew, and they used the same mathematical formula to create all these different shapes, and they knew that they could make Sudamar with the two rooms resonate, at the end of the day, all resonate at 34.4, as well as a Gopika, but completely different shapes. Okay, to recap. No comparison ever made before or after. Again, there's an argument about the schist caves, potentially, if you move the dates, they could be the prototype, but really there's nothing like this that appears in history, in Indian history. It looks nothing like the caves of the temples around the time, around 250 BC, and there's been nothing like it since. There is, symmetrical volumes of shape, inclined walls, vaulted ceilings with precision tolerances on par with modern machining, and the caves are tuned. They are designed and created specifically with focus points for why, and the mirror finish polished, on the crazy arcs and stuff. It's just super cool. And there's no historical record of them ever being made, just gifted. So I'm leave it up to you to where you think when they were made, or by who or why, but I personally don't believe Ashoka designed these and then gifted them kind of out of order to the peasants. And it's the same with them, the polish that you get in India, like the super shiny stuff. I have seen, there's a head in it, it was at Luxor Temple. There was this amazing polished head, and it was one of the only things in Egypt that I'd seen that was polished on a curve. Again, I hadn't scanned it or anything, so I don't know how precise the curve is, but it looked pretty shiny. And it was my favorite thing in the Luxor Temple, and I went to show some people on the last tour. I was like, guys, you've got to check out this head. It's so cool. It's polished, and it was gone. They'd taken it. And I have noticed in the sort of years since 2020 that I've been going to Egypt that some of the stuff that is really exciting for the ancient tech people to go and check out, they are squirreling that away. And I was like, oh my God, it's gone. And so, interesting. But when you ask people, okay, well, how did they polish granite to that level, either in Egypt or here? Stonemasons still don't have an answer to that. It's like mainstream unanswered. They're like, well, we don't know how they did it. We know they did because it's there, but we don't know how. That makes me not sleep at night. How do they do it? We were trying to work out what to name that in the English translation, because there was a word for it in French for the join, and I was like, okay, I don't know what, when there's like, okay, I didn't know what that was, so I was like, I called it the ceiling start. I was like, that's in English, that would be the ceiling start.
What do you call it in French?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the French have so much math in the office, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, it was interesting, the translating. I didn't realize how different English and French was. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts that came to mind while I was watching this. So I think you said 2 of the 7 are considered unfinished.
Yes.
Because you can see crude, unsymmetrical removal of some of the rock inside. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that could also be the marks of an attempted reshaping. Like at some point someone decided they didn't like this weird shape, and they decided, we'll finish it. They thought they could, quote, finish it in a shape that they wanted.
Yeah, I think that with the Lomas Rishi, the one that has the inscription for 700 years later, and the outside definitely, and I have a feeling that they definitely tried to do a repurpose or an upcycle, or somebody was like, I'm going to make this look different, and then they were like, oh, bugger, it's really hard.
So that would mean a possibility that they had been originally finished by their original builders, but in a shape that people came along later, didn't like, said,
yeah,
we can fix it.
Well, the stonemason said you would never polish something like the walls if it was unfinished. So that's their clue to say that cave was originally finished. And this is, they were like, those tool marks came after because they seemed to. So I agree with you.
And one other comment on the schist caves. I think that's very interesting. I take it they haven't been studied as carefully as the granite caves in Barabar?
No, I don't think they scanned them. The film team didn't, as far as I'm aware, they didn't scan the schist ones.
It would be an interesting hypothesis to study those schist caves and to see if perhaps the original schist caves might have been built by the same people who built the Barabar Caves in granite, but because the material was schist, it weathered away.
Yeah.
And also it was easier to work, so people found it easier to rework the schist caves. But maybe they were the same type of machine, which, when it was originally built, worked great. It worked fine whether it was built in schist or in granite. So they might be worth studying.
I'll relay that to Patrice, because I think that's absolutely bang on, yeah. Hi,
Thank
Bob.
you, Jahannah, for a very interesting and original talk. Obviously, I can't be the only person in the room to think this. If you have a resonant chamber that is focusing sound to a seated person into their head, of course, it's difficult to sing at 34.4 hertz, but you could sing at a harmonic. Did the investigators do or consider doing chanting or resonant sound from their own voice at those focal points and see if it produced a state of euphoria? Or I would argue that you would want to get euphoria, not like something else.
Yeah, they go into the caves of nightmares. They did. They bought a female shaman and a male shaman, and I didn't.
The female did better, right?
The what? Sorry.
Carry on.
And yeah, the recording of I definitely heard the female ones in the movie. The male one I got the recording of, and it is just the sound is insane. They did say that even though the guy's a scientist, Patrice is also super open to like esoteric spiritual stuff, and he said it was just amazing. But he doesn't believe. Well, he thinks it's something to do for sure with the human psyche, and the fact that all of the evidence seems to point towards the fact that it was to be in a particular location, whether that's for healing, whether that's for getting high, speaking to the aliens, whatever. But
okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an awesome talk.
Thank you.
I don't know as much of the nuts and bolts to things, so I'm glad we've got the archaeologists and the numbers and all that, but as I was listening and watching and referencing, I don't think I'm in the wrong crowd that I would be ostracized to talk about like alien involvement. But it reminded me of something I'd seen with a UFO craft at some point where the inside allegedly looked very kind of raw, almost as though in like the notion has been floated of like, thinking of a chair, and there's the chair, and driving the ship with the mind. So there's these components to consciousness that allow a certain level of manifestation, architecture, and creation that I could assume or think about, things higher than me being able to do. And it almost reminded me of like a real-time Minecraft of, okay, we want an elongated capsule shape. We want a spherical thing.
Yep.
And if I'm working with natural sacred geometry, then the shapes are going to take on the flow in the corners of all the things we think of from masonry, Freemasonry, architecture, all of that. And so it's almost like it could have been gifted in a sense that some, I don't know, we could say E.T., we could say Ascended Master, we could use what, carved out mentally with consciousness this kind of 3D printed dome that also has, if it was projected and manifested through consciousness, it could have been gifted with the intent that these dimensions and shapes resonate in such a way as to have an effect on consciousness when we get a human or a being that has the head working with the sound, and also something about the energetic acoustics. It's got that functional, it's the art and function put together that's got the acoustic for some kind to conduct through the shapes, forms, materials, ceremonial processes that's like gifted in some way. But it, kept referencing, it's like the inside of a spaceship.
Yeah.
Something about it. How do we, I haven't seen the inside of a
I know,
spaceship.
it looks like you sit in the cave and it's Flight of the Navigator, It's kind of like, I
it's
get
like,
that.
I just feel like, 3D Minecraft. I've carved out this space. I need this curve. I need that. And just kind of beautiful dance of consciousness. So just speculating and throwing that out into the ether. Thank you.
I do recommend watching the full documentary, because this was 45 minutes. The documentary is about 2.5 hours, and they go way more into the stuff that's a bit more above my head about how they created the volume and the shape and the maths, and each cave, they realize it's the same mathematical technique to make all of them.
I love the Virgo details. I'm such a Sagittarius big picture person too. So remind me the name of this place so when I want to like tell people.
Barabar Caves.
Barabar. Okay,
yeah.
I feel like
Barabar.
I'm already at that bar in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. So I know you mentioned the inscriptions that are actually on the wall that kind of, they say, dated to that specific time. Are there any local legends? Like, did you speak to any of the locals and
Yes,
they
there-
said, oh no, it was actually built by such and such?
So there is a local legend when they spoke to like the kind of like a local priest equivalent. They said that the local indigenous sort of story of it is that they were not made by humans. So they said that it was like made by the gods, and that they were, yeah. And so and there's a small one that it looked like it was maybe a. When they scanned it, it's not part of the main 7. There was one that was further away. It looked like it might have been another. They carved out of granite this kind of thing. But so the priest, that's a sacred temple to them. So they revered them. But then again, that wasn't the original intention. They don't think that they're temples because of the speaking thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the actual like indigenous lore is that they were made by the gods and something otherworldly. They don't think it was Ashoka. Just a long time ago, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
But India's history goes back like very far. Okay, we're gonna, yes, just a few more, then we're gonna have to get on to the next.
Are there any sound recordings of experiments available?
Yes, so if you watch
It's on
in the documentary,
Right.
they put more of the sound in.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I will try and find. Patrice did send me the shaman on WhatsApp, so if I can find it later this afternoon, I'll come back on stage and I'll play you the shaman.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so there's a theory that Lemuria was in the Indian Ocean. Do you think that something like this lends credence to that theory at all?
Oh, well, I mean, speaking to Praveen yesterday, who is from India and he's got way more knowledge about India than me, he was saying that there's so much that is under the water right now in India that there is literally no money India doesn't have the money to excavate them. So when the Thailand tsunami, when that happened, there was a lot of video footage. The tide went right out, and then temples and things started popping up, which the Indian authorities had to address because it was caught globally on camera. But Praveen is saying that there's so much stuff that's popping out from underwater, but they're covering it up with sand purely because they don't have the money to address it or look into it. But there is like a whole other level of stuff that's under ancient India. So this is the stuff that's in the high ground, but I'm open to the idea that there's stuff like this, lower down. There's a lot under the sea. Yeah.
Thanks.
First of all, I saw the documentary you did, and it was brilliant.
Thank you.
2 problems I have. One, you can't date rock.
Yes.
It could have been carved out last week. It could have been carved out 200,000 years ago. They're both going to date the same. You cannot date rock. Second one, I think they're barking up the wrong tree when they're trying to have people do sounds. I think this is a machine. This isn't something that was done for people, it's a machine. Could it have been used to transmute materials? That focal point, could you put a material there?
You pop
and
it there and
shot
off it
with
goes.
Nikola Tesla said you'll find the answers in the universe through vibration and frequency.
Yeah. And this is good. This is why I want more people to know about it, because it takes just one person's perspective on it to go, wait, have you thought about, and you're like, yes, that's what Patrice is also wanting as well. He's super open to people getting in contact and being like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So Jayan Films is the company, and they're like self-funded. They do all this work on Kickstarters. So really, if you can share the word and get it out there, and it'll help them and just help ancient history. All right, guys, I'm going to get ready, and then I'm going to come back on as your host and introduce the next speaker. So you can take 5, but make sure you stay for the next speaker because it is awesome.